Dabo Swinney didn't hold back after Clemson's scrimmage before spring break, calling out a lack of discipline, turnovers, and mental mistakes. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of this show, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM, The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an episode. You know how Locked On is. We have an episode Monday through Friday all about your Clemson Tigers. And don't forget to follow me over on X at The Morgan T Show. In between shows, we can talk about Clemson as well. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. Coming up on today's show, Dabo calls out a lack of discipline. Why this isn't the reason to hit the panic button just yet. Also, Clemson's biggest problem group exposed in the scrimmage before spring break, why it's now is the best time to fix them. And then also we'll finish up the show talking about Pro Day at Clemson and who helped improve their NFL draft stock. Dabo Swinney did not sugarcoat things today, talking about the undisciplinedness of their scrimmage before the spring break, penalties, mental lapses, turnovers, everything that went wrong. He definitely called it out. He doesn't always do that. I thought it was very interesting that he chose to do so, but seems like he was probably a little bit frustrated by his football team right before spring break. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff that definitely should concern you. If we were sitting here in August, September, or October, those are the things that you can't have happen. This team needs to be building up to a national championship level team, and they cannot afford to have mental lapses and mistakes and turnovers over and over, because you know those are the things that hurt Clemson in 2024, and they can come right back up to hurt you as well this season. They have everything they need. They've built everything as far as coaching staff and as far as replacing players on the roster to get them to a postseason again, into the college football playoffs. But turnovers and penalties and mistakes can definitely take everything away from you in an instant if you lose the wrong game or end up losing multiple games. However, we should just pump the brakes, because it's not September, it's not August, it's not October, it is March. Spring practice is literally designed for this situation. And some of it could be coach speak out there. This is time for Clemson to iron the kinks out, and they're not going to be a finished product. Now, when it comes to Dabo Swinney, we know he can go out there. He's very calculated. He's not going to call out specific players unless he knows for sure that they can handle it. So the guys that he mentions, to me, most of those guys are guys that are probably leaders on the team, or guys that he knows that is very talented and maybe just not up to standard. I'll say this too. It's kind of refreshing to see Dabo Swinney the way he is right now, coming out and calling out players and calling out the standard. They need to get back to that best is the standard, and not just, kind of doing your best, but best meaning excellence is the standard. That's for sure. We know it's kind of doing your best, but also we want national championship caliber best as well. Here's some notes that I put down that stood out to me on what he called out specifically. He said a player, unnamed, got tossed for a personal foul. Now, was that frustrating? I'm sure it was. Was it sloppy? Yeah. Was it undisciplined? Oh yeah. But getting tossed out also shows a little bit of aggressiveness and kind of some fight in that player. Now, that player was unnamed, so I can't call out who it was or know what position they were in. But you want that fight. This is a gladiator sport. This is a hand-to-hand combat type situation. So I'm not necessarily frustrated or concerned or upset that a player would get tossed out of practice for doing something, unless it was something that was just really, really uncalled for, and even maybe harmful to the other player and could possibly cause injury. Now that would be an extreme, not just sloppy, but definitely something that could get you suspended or kicked off the team. I don't think it was that. Considering the fact that he called it out publicly, a player probably got too heated, and it goes back to the mental lapses and the lack of discipline. When you do that kind of stuff in a game, yeah, you could get tossed out. You do that kind of stuff in a game, you're going to get a penalty for your team, and that opponent is going to be able to continue their drive against you or be able to put you behind the line and behind the chains. And those are two scenarios where you cannot have happen if you're already playing in a tight game in that situation. So another thing that he mentioned too was they were on a 4th and 11 and the defense jumped off sides. Really extremely frustrating because it goes back to allowing the offense to have another shot at short yardage to continue to move the ball down the field. And that goes back to where when you're in a tight game, when you're in a matchup that's a rivalry game or an SEC out of conference or maybe a road game, those are the kind of things that can get the teams back into it, can get the fan bases back into it, and really upset your ability to win a football game. It seems very little, but the little things can add up and start to snowball on you. So I can understand from a head coach perspective that he would want to really hone in on these things and get those things worked out. Here's one that I think might frustrate you just a little bit, even though it is spring. And as I mentioned, you don't hit the panic button, but they made a field goal. And then there was motion that wiped away the field goal and there was a penalty. How does that sound? Does that remind you of anything last year? And then after the penalty was assessed, they were a little bit further back and they missed the field goal on the redo. Yikes. That's not something I was really excited to hear about because I was hoping, that they would fix these special team issues very quickly. It seems like they're still working through some things on the special team side of things because Clemson really could have won. We're in situations where they could have held a lead and continued to hold a lead, or maybe even continue to hold possession or have a better advantage on time of possession if they hadn't made some boneheaded if they hadn't had some boneheaded results in special teams, especially with field goals. They left a lot of points on the field because of some head scratching mistakes on field goals and lack of blocking and lack of execution, and not really just from the kicker standpoint. I mean, I know they said the kicker missed. They didn't mention if it was Nolan Hoosier or not, but they did mention that the field goal was missed and not a specific player that I have down. So the last thing I had was that the offense, they seemed very casual. He said they fumbled the ball a couple of times too, and that's something that they really have to clean up. Now the sloppiness, for sure, you're going to lose games in the fall if you keep doing this. We've seen it in the tight games. We've seen it against South Carolina. Dabo's championship teams and teams that go deep into the playoffs, they've been able to kind of hide those things and limit those issues for sure. And they're very disciplined, not only disciplined individually, but disciplined in player groups and disciplined on both sides of the ball, not just on defense, disciplining each other and holding each other accountable, but defense holding the offense accountable and vice versa. Right now, Clemson's not there, but it is just the spring. It's about finding those problems, not hiding them, getting them out in the open. Dabo's been through this before. A sloppy March can bring to a dominant November. If we're still talking about this stuff in August and September, then I'm concerned for sure. Is this making me raise my eyebrow a little bit? Maybe. A people's eyebrow? Maybe. But it's not really hitting the panic button just yet. It is not the panic button. It is the process. Coming up next, Clemson's biggest weaknesses were exposed in this scrimmage. Let's break it down and specific player group too, and why, again, do not hit the panic button. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much money I was spending on eating out. Now I budget smarter and I save much, much more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Hey, this episode is also brought to you by another sponsor, Factor. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated with Factor. You get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences. Each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I love Factor because it helps me keep track with delicious meals that don't take up a ton of time. I'm not sitting here wondering, what am I going to eat today or tomorrow or this weekend? I can eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Dabo doesn't mince words about this spring practice and getting into spring break. And I know I'm not beating up a ton of people. He even called out Cade Klubnik and said, you know what? He really wasn't ready for this week. And I'm not really worried about the quarterback situation. He said Christopher Vizina did well. Cade Klubnik was kind of going through the motions. Maybe wasn't anticipating having to play as many snaps because he was getting ready for Cancun or wherever they're going to go. And I can understand. I know I was in college at one time, and I understand you're looking forward to the week off and you're looking forward to spring break. And that's probably more important than one last practice. But Dabo's holding that standard, and you got to like that as a Clemson fan, because that's what you want from the head coach position. Not just the standard for quarterback position, but he didn't mince words about the young quarterbacks either. And he said facts are that they're not ready. And they're Clemson's biggest problem right now. Tavoy Fagan, not ready. Corian Gibson, not ready. He said every area needs work, not just one single area on these young cornerbacks. Now, I'm trying to read through the lines here to see if he's just trying to motivate these guys a little bit more. Maybe he felt like they were a little bit undisciplined, allowing for some of bigger plays. Or, you know, if he's just trying to kind of build up those guys to push themselves even further because he knows he needs more depth at the cornerback position. He mentioned that he was going to have his starters like Avion Terrell kind of be on a snap limit or a play limit. So they didn't really get a lot of opportunities out there. But he also mentioned he doesn't need to see those true starters out there, those guys that have been playing, 800, 700 snaps, 600 snaps. He doesn't really need to see those guys. He needs to see the guys that he hasn't seen a ton of snaps on. And he said he really wasn't excited about what he saw. So I kind of don't know how to feel about that. Maybe Clemson is hurting in secondary depth in 2025. Maybe that's an area of concern. Can they cover it up, or can they build up to it to where it's no longer a concern? It sounds a little bit harsh to say from the head coach that everything needs work, not just one thing. But let's flip it this way. Clemson schedules these scrimmages early and often, and you got to find out what you've got, and you can't do it by going easy on everybody and going through the motions. I bet this was kind of a little bit of a setup. Maybe the players feel that way. Hey, you're getting into the last scrimmage before spring break, and you're thinking, why are you so critical on us, Dabo? Why are you so critical on us, coach? But he's throwing these guys into the fire now. Why? Why is it important in March? Because they're going to be battle tested in August. If you don't do it now, you're going to regret it later. On offense, again, the discipline issues were there. Penalties were there. Turnovers were there from the running back group, even though he said he loved the running back guys out there. Adam Randall, Gideon Davidson, just a freak athlete. But it's frustrating for sure, no question, for Dabo. He wouldn't come out in a 25-minute post-game press conference and talk about all the bad things if it wasn't kind of lingering on his mind. But there's a little bit of a silver lining for me. He said the defensive line looked nasty. They forced turnovers in the red zone, and they showed a glimpse of what they can be and very difficult to score against when you get into short yardage situations. TJ Parker, Peter Woods being held back a little bit, but he said again, it's because those guys are proven commodities, and that's a good problem to have if you're Clemson. Get these young guys in there, get them in there, get them some reps, get them some opportunities. Let them make their mistakes now, because mistakes now are fixable. You still have a ton of time. Spring, to me, is kind of like the experiment lab, right? It's kind of like going in there and throwing people in, getting a new mix of combination of guys that you maybe wouldn't try in August and September and October, and seeing what happens. Maybe it's a disaster, but it's a good disaster because now you know, hey, this is not something I want to do against LSU. This is not something I want to do against against South Carolina in November, at least yet, right? It's not the stage for perfection. It's the stage for experimenting. And I think Dabo knows exactly what he's doing, and he's calling out the right players for sure too. Think about it. 2 years ago, we saw a lot of the same growing pains. By the fall, Clemson was going into, and even last year, going into an ACC title and still fighting to be one of the best teams in the ACC and fighting for a postseason. So I'm not saying that the group has to be there yet. One thing I do like is that they seem to be less banged up and injured than they have been before. I don't want a ton of guys out because they're recovering from serious injury. Now, there are a few guys out there like Jay Haynes that are doing that, but it seems like they're kind of holding back their starters and seeing what these secondary guys, these second string guys, these third string guys can do. For now, I think Clemson is working through everything to get the best players in the game at the right time and the right combination of players, because it's going to, whatever they do now is going to pay off dividends in the future for sure. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about Clemson's Pro Day. You may have seen some of the results over on social media. I'm going to tell you what I think about it and which Tigers help their draft stock the most. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. And then it was waiting and wondering and worrying a little more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. I love that. An expert who will find your every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything you need with 100% accuracy. All you can get is the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Clemson's Pro Day results, which Tiger helped their draft stock and improved what they could do in the next level, maybe on Sundays. They held their Pro Day, and it was a great way to show what Clemson's future pros can do with a lot of NFL scouts. I heard there were scouts there from all 32 teams, and even Mike Tomlin was there as well to look at these Tiger standouts. And let's break down some of the numbers that we saw and what it means. One of the biggest, or the three biggest winners and risers for me from this, one that I love to say was RJ Mickens, safety, 6 foot, 199. He ran a 4.4940, a 41.5-inch vertical, and a 10 foot 1 inch broad jump. I got to tell you, when I saw that 41.5 vertical, I was like, this has to be a mistake. No, who jumps that high? I can't believe it. I mean, this guy was jumping like 10 feet higher than anybody else there. It didn't make any sense to me. That is elite explosiveness for sure. Scouts love safeties who can cover ground. Mickens, we know, can cover ground. Mickens just screamed, hey, I need to be one of the guys on top of your leaderboard in the safety position. Maybe not a day one guy, maybe not a round one guy, but I could see right now with what we're seeing from his measurables and some of the numbers he's putting up, a day two, round two type guy with that type of performance. So congratulations to RJ Mickens. I think he had a good pro day. To me, I would put him as my biggest winner and riser for sure. Barrett Carter, also linebacker, 6 foot, a little bit higher than 6 foot, 232, great weight there, a 4.64 40, 22 bench reps, 34.5-inch vertical. He has the speed to get to the outside and play an off-ball linebacker. He's definitely there. You know, he's a heat-seeking missile, and this keeps him in that early round conversation as well. The measurables are there. I think for Barrett Carter, I know a lot of fans would probably say, well, Morgan, there's some things, we need to see him clean up. The film wasn't that great with Barrett Carter in his final season at Clemson. And I think some of that is definitely his own doing with some of those missed tackles that we saw early on in the season and kind of trickled into late in the season. I felt like he got better as the season went on, but it was still here and there some frustrating times with some bad angles, some bad footwork, and really more of the hand tackling there. So, but I will say overall from a pro day perspective, Barrett Carter didn't do anything but improve his stock to me. And another guy that kind of jumped out to me was Peyton Page, defensive tackle, 6'3", and a fourth, 300 pounds, 5'13", 40, 33-inch vertical, a 9 foot, 8-inch broad jump. 300-pounder that can run at speeds like that and has that agility there. Teams need a disruptive defensive tackle at the NFL level. So I really like what these three guys are doing. And Peyton Page, he kind of had to wait his time around, and he got developed around some big-time defensive interior guys. And so he got to learn from the best while he was here at Clemson. And wasn't really a true starter that kind of solidified his position, but was a reliable backup and a reliable guy that could rotate in at the starter position for sure. So I'm curious to see how far he can go. I'm not going to give you a speculation on where he will be as far as a draft pick, because I really don't know. But to me, he also is a riser for me. So again, RJ Mickens, Barrett Carter, and Peyton Page did what they could do to improve their draft stock. Now, two guys that didn't test that I was kind of looking forward to seeing, but missed their opportunity and didn't participate were Phil Maffa. I kind of wanted to see what he could do. I really wanted to see his speed and what he could show. I know there's a lot of question marks out there on what his top speed is and if he has that extra gear and how that shoulder is doing for him and his neck and the issues that he had with being injured late on in the season. I want to see how recovered he is, how healthy he is, and again, how fast he is and if he can show some of that extra gear that he has. We know that he's a big-time back, but he's also pretty confident catching balls from the backfield. So I think Phil Maffa is a guy that could contribute to a team at the NFL level. He might be more of that NFL-ready back, but I'm curious to see where he'll go with limited amount of exposure in these pro days and scouting reports that we have. Another guy, too, that's still recovering from his time of, some surgeries here and there, but he didn't test was Marcus Tate, offensive lineman, 6'5", 332, big dude, same deal. NFL love a big guy like this. Didn't give him anything to look at pro day, but I will say Marcus Tate has a lot of really good film on him at the left guard position. He moves really well. He was a force when he was out there for Clemson. And we're definitely going to miss him for sure. Thankfully, though, Clemson doesn't have a ton of offensive line that they have to replace in 2025 outside of Marcus Tate. So I would think that Colin Sadler would enter in and replace him there at the left guard position. That's probably my number one pick there. Maybe Elijah Thurman will go in and jump Sadler. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. But Clemson definitely has some guys that are ready to replace Marcus Tate. For Phil Maffa's side of the ball, or for Phil Maffa's position, we know the running back position is kind of one of those biggest question marks of what they're going to do. Signs right now from what Dabo Swinney told us from his post-scrimmage press conference, signs are pointing towards Adam Randall and Gideon Davidson. Those are the 1 and 2. And to me right now, because we know that, Jay Haynes is injured and he's recovering, you're looking at Jarvis Green. He brings your speed. and you're looking at Keith Adams Jr., he's bringing the hits there, but he admitted those guys probably not every down backs. So who's going to be your every down back? Who's going to be your first, second, third down guy? Yet to tell. But Davidson and Adam Randall also 1 and 2 for me, for sure. Coming up, I wanted to tell you too, and before we finish out the show, why Clemson is still in great hands. Look, I get it. Dabo Swinney has been really, when you listen to this, if you go on and you listen to his press conference, he seems to be pretty harsh. But I'm telling you, going back to what we said in segment 1, let's zoom out. It's all about building towards the national championship, building towards the postseason, building towards beating South Carolina, building towards winning your opener and winning your conference, and all those things that are the big goals for Clemson. You don't get 2 national titles and 8 ACC championships and a winning percentage that's one of the best against anybody in college football history like Dabo has by just messing around and going through the motions. And I think Dabo caught some of the guys looking forward to spring break, but there's no need to hit the panic button for sure. I think Clemson is going to have a great 2025 season. They're bringing back a ton of players for sure. I'm not worried about Cade Klubnik and him saying he's a little bit checked out, because I know there are definite question marks, and we've addressed them here on the podcast. But by December, Clemson this last season was clicking. They were able to get and beat SMU. They were able to get into the playoffs and really be the best performance of the first round in the college football playoffs of any team. I think Clemson had the best performance of anyone, and they had opportunities to beat Texas for sure. So Dabo has got the new staff in there. Tom Allen, we're hearing great things. We're hearing great things from the new guys. Biggest question mark on the defense got to be the secondary, and not just not really the starters, but the backup secondary. Who's going to step up and fill in these roles and be a rotational guy, or maybe even be a guy who can push for starting time? And then on the offensive side of the ball, I'm probably going to say the biggest question mark for me is the running back room and who's going to come out as a leader, but also that tight end position. I wonder who's going to kind of fill in that tight end position, Christian Bentoncourt or Olsen Pat Henry, or maybe someone else. I'm curious to see. Didn't hear much about those guys, but I'm curious to see where they will go for sure. I really appreciate everyone being a part of the Locked On podcast. You know, this is my half of my second, this is the middle part of my second month here at Locked On. I'm really enjoying my time here, and I appreciate everyone's love and support over on the podcast. Got a ton of listeners over there, so thank you so much for listening in. And over on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. And also, thank you for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here. Be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, that's the end of the show. I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll see you at the top of the hill.